Welcome to the Branding Laboratory, where we explore the art and science of branding. I'm your host, Deevo Tindall, brand strategist, storyteller, and master photographer. Join us as we dive deep into the captivating stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you elevate your brand and connect deeply with your audience. Let's get started. Welcome to the Branding Laboratory, where we dive deep into the art and science of branding and storytelling. And we have real candid conversations with our guests so that you can hear their brand story and hopefully learn from it, use it for inspiration, use it for anything that you need, maybe education. I'm your host, Deevo. I am the Chief Experience Officer for the Brand Storyteller and this podcast. I am a master photographer, brand strategist, and serial entrepreneur like our guest is about to join us today. And my mission is to help leaders and small business owners tell their story and build really powerful brands that resonate with a very specific audience that they want to talk to. And in every single episode, we explore different aspects of branding and marketing and scaling your business with the goal of giving you actionable insights that you can use right away in your business. So without further ado, today's fantastic guest who's going to share some of his insights and the problems that he's solving for his clients and how his brand is making a difference in the world. Our guest is Robert White. He is a seasoned mentor to entrepreneurs and executives, so that's right up my alley. He's a speaker. I saw some of his YouTube shows, phenomenal public speaker. Check him out, and we'll give you those handles at the end of the show in the show notes. He's also a best-selling author. Why is it that every guest I bring on the show is a best-selling author and way smarter than me? Okay, that's the point. We want to learn from the people who are better than us, right? Surround yourself with the people who are doing better things so that you have inspiration to grow. And he is doing a bunch of other things. His work focuses primarily, and he's going to tell it better than I am, but integrating a heart-centered, I got to learn a lot about that, a result-oriented, heart-centered, and transformational leadership approach to being a more effective leader. Robert, thank you for being on the Branding Laboratory, my friend.
I'm delighted to be with you, Deevo. And after that introduction, I can't wait to hear what I have to say.
I love it. Before we dive into the show, one question I always like to learn from other people. Do you have a favorite brand that you really admire and why?
Wow, something I hadn't thought about.
Besides for us.
Yeah, there's a food service thing called Factor where they deliver meals basically for a single guy. It's a great thing if I don't want to cook. But their customer service, I would say their integrity, they do exactly what they say they're going to do. They've used technology, but they're yet very human. There's just a whole lot of things about it that works for me, and which was a kind of a delightful surprise. There are a lot of bigger companies that don't do that kind of integrated, high integrity service, and they do. They're consistently good at what they do.
Say what you mean and do what you say, right?
It's an old line, but it's absolutely essential.
One of my favorite cliches, lines, quotes, whatever. All right, let's talk a little bit about who you are and your origin story. One of the things that fascinates me most about having the ability to do this podcast is that I get to hear people like yourselves' origin stories and how you got to where you are today, whether it was corporate world first, whether it was traveling the world second, whatever it is. Tell me your origin story and how all of the things that you've done along the way have influenced you in this trajectory where you are today.
If the life is long enough that the story becomes too long, but I did grow up in poverty and abuse and a lot of those things that make for a good movie that I would prefer to have Robert Redford star in. But I graduated high school number 6 out of 300, and that year I made more money than my father had ever made. I had gotten a job in radio, had been successful there. The audience then was teenagers, and I was one, so that all worked. But the key part of the story that I thought would be good to share with you is that my father had died when I was 14, and I had moved in with another family. My family moved back to the South. And so I telephoned my mother, and that was a big deal in those days to telephone somebody. I telephoned her, and as I look back on it now, it was to brag, to say, I graduated 6 out of 300. I was named most likely to succeed. I have the hottest radio show in my state, and I made a lot of money, which most of it I sent to her. And so I called her to brag, and I told her that I was number 6 out of 300. And the first words out of her mouth were, "Why weren't you number 1?" And that explains our entire relationship. She was an intensely critical woman. She had been widowed 3 times, including my father being the third. And she always bounced back. She always got off the floor, but she was an angry, violent, and critical person.
Mm,
And I didn't know, you're a kid, you don't know about influences and deeply seated beliefs and all that stuff. But I just knew that I was rejecting a lot of that.
mm,
But I did spend the next 10 years of my life making my classmates wrong.
mm,
By the time I was 27, I'd had 3 heart attacks. I had been told I wasn't going to live past 35. I had daily chest pain. I was failing in my little business, and I was divorced. Felt horribly guilty about that. I don't know if I ever used the word guilt, but I just knew that I had really screwed it up and I didn't feel good about it. And a friend sent me to one of the early human potential movement trainings, and my whole life changed for the better. To make a long story short, I put a lot of people into that training, not because I understood it, but because I got such great results. And when I sent those people, my family, my friends, my salespeople, life got better for me.
mm,
And so I sent over 400 people into that training without really knowing what it was, except that it worked.
mm,
And got a phone call from the founder of that company. He brought me out to California for a meeting, and 10 days later, I was president of a company called Mind Dynamics. So I have 4 years where I worked for someone else. It was a highly entrepreneurial working for someone else, but I did have a job. Spent 2 years on the US business, 2 years running around the world, setting up foreign subsidiaries of that company. Ownership changed. I quit, started a company called LifeSpring. That didn't work for me, even though LifeSpring went on to be very successful under a different leadership. And the learning from that is what has influenced me personally. And so the learning from a failure is what influenced me personally and strongly influenced the work that I do today with small and medium sized business people. The learning was profound and really shook me up and really changed the whole course of my life. That after I sold LifeSpring, that company, to the staff, but I sold it for nothing down and forever to pay.
mm.
And they took longer than forever to pay. Another one of those old lines.
I've
But
not heard that line before. I like that.
they did finally pay me though. And I sold it to staff. They had no money. I had no money. And now I was unemployed. I had put every penny I had into that business. I'm unemployable and I've got children and a mortgage and all that stuff. And the only country I said no to during the Mind Dynamics days in terms of expansion was Japan. And once a month for 4 years, they contacted me and asked me to come to Japan to bring this idea of these trainings to Japan. And I had reasons not to, a lot of them. And now I'm unemployed and they make a new offer. Come for 90 days, set up a program and leave, and we will pay you for 1 year. Uh, so I said yes. And it was not visionary, it was not values led. It was something I was good at and that I could do for 3 months. I figure I can survive in Japan for 3 months. That 3 months turned into 12 years the first time. I've now lived abroad for 23 years of my working life. I built a company in Asia that became the largest training company in Asia, 15 training centers, 240 full-time people, another 60 contract trainers, and successful. Between those two companies, my claim to fame, if I've got one, is that 1,300,000 graduates now of these high impact leadership development programs, and a book that's done well, and a recorded program with Nightingale Conant that's done well. And that's me. I love what I do. I love working with people like me, people that are running a business. Maybe they're running into a lot of problems. Maybe they're running into a lot of opportunity, but something tells them that they could use a seasoned hand
Yeah.
helping them be successful.
Let's dive into something you said a second ago, and you talked about actually two things. I'm going to use that line with my daughter. I bought her a car 2 years ago, and she was supposed to be paying down payments every month on it. I told her I'd buy half of the car. You have to pay the second half of the car. But she's forever. What is it? Forever. Never, what did you say? Forever down payment, never to pay. That's my daughter.
No, you no money down and forever to pay.
Yeah. One of the things I do want to dive into, you talked a little bit about, and by the way, storied career so far, fantastic. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show, just because there's so many things that my listeners and me could learn from people like yourself. And so the whole point is to bring seasoned experts like you on and have discussions around stuff. But you said something that really jogged me to think about for a second. Are entrepreneurs unemployable? And I know you were half jesting, you're unemployable. But when you take a look at entrepreneurs, true entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs like yourself and myself, are we now evicting ourselves if we ever wanted to go back to the corporate world and unemployable unless we're running the actual company?
I think there are a lot of exceptions. So let's give both of us an out on this, Deevo. I think there are exceptions, but in the main, what marks an entrepreneur is to have an idea and pursue it passionately. And in organizations, that quite often conflicts with that organization's purpose, vision, and values. And you become a problem for them. Now, there are situations, I've seen a few, where they bring in a former entrepreneur and honor the contribution that man or woman can make.
Yeah.
But I think that's rare.
I was thinking more on it's a double-edged sword because as a corporation, you're now taking on somebody who has tasted freedom, who has had autonomy, who has been running their business on their own, who has made all the executive decisions, who has had all of the breadth of experience that comes with running a company. And then suddenly you're being thrust back into work for somebody else and flip that around as an entrepreneur. Are you able to put yourself back into that space? I don't know personally if I wasn't running my own business, and I'm not shutting the door. I'm just saying if I were to decide tomorrow to go back into the corporate world, I don't know how I would thrive in it, to be honest with you, because I've tasted freedom. I've seen what it looks like on the other side. The grass is greener for certain types of people like you and I. So anyhow, let's jump into some things that are really important to me as well. And I'd like to hear your space on this. And it really centers around core philosophies and the impact that you're trying to make in the world. And so you're teaching seasoned executives, you're a coach, you're a mentor, and you're showing them sort of the ropes of the things that you know and helping serve as an accountability partner and all that. How much has your core philosophies, do you think, especially as a child? You know, you mentioned some troubling segments there in the beginning with your mother and stuff. How much of those things, those learned behaviors, the context, and everything you've learned in your storied career, how much does that go into what you're doing now? And what are those personal philosophies? What sort of motivates you day to day?
Devo, I was attracted to this show because of you and your approach to life and the fact that you use stories to build a brand. So I'll share a story. When we started to get some traction, originally in Japan, where we had eventually seven training centers, but in the early days, we started to get some traction. Now, we had a money back guarantee, and over 17 years of keeping numbers, 1.7% of the people that attended our first level training asked for their money back. Now, some people, particularly on my staff, would say that's just a graduate saying to some friend, look, go do this training and then you can get your money back, whether you like it or you don't like it. So there were some people like that. And some people didn't get the value that they expected and they legitimately asked for their money back and we gave it to them. 1.7%, pretty good number overall.
Mm-hmm.
If it crept up a little bit, we acted on it. If it went down, we celebrated. But that was reality. Then we started noticing something, which is that some people, they're in the same room with the same trainer, with the same content, the same experience, and yet they go out after the training and create miracles. We had the first open wheel, the Indy cars, the first Japanese driver of an Indy car. He worked, of course, for Honda. They're showing off their engines. And he never wins. He doesn't even come close to winning. And he comes and does our training. I didn't know that. There were a lot of people coming and doing our trainings. He graduates, goes out and wins his first race. Honda's first win ever was a guy who came to our training and figured out that the only thing in the way of his winning was him. Right. So we had those kinds of experiences. Business people that came in, they were doing pretty well when they came in and they exploded their businesses after they did our training, even though we don't talk about business, we don't talk about selling, we don't talk about money. We get them out of the way, which is what had happened to me years earlier. So we studied those people the unicorns, as they're now called, right? People that just took the same material and got incredible success. And we surveyed over 1,000 of them. And what we found out originally was that they came into our training with a certain set of principles. And originally we identified 5 of those, and it eventually got up to 8. So we now have a published document that your listeners can access free, which is about these 8 principles for success. And all 8 of them are things that you know already. You don't need us. But what happens is you grow up, you learn these things at an unconscious level, and then you drift away from them.
Yeah.
So things like becoming very clear about what you want, like crystal clear, telling the truth rigorously, expressing yourself fully, participating 100% instead of sitting in the stands watching the game, playing win instead of win-lose. So things like that. The last one, number 8, is the most important, which is everything flows from commitment and personal responsibility, doing what you say you're going to do. So those principles that's what guides my life. If I'm a little bit off, if I'm not getting what I want in my life, I go back to those 8 principles and I ask myself, where am I falling short? Where would a little effort, a little shift, a little conversation with somebody I respect, a book that I need to go back to and reread, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I almost always find what it is that I'm doing that's influencing the result that I'm producing, and how I've gotten off of something I actually already knew. So a lot of the work I do is to help people see what they already know and are not practicing.
You said we don't necessarily need to read them. We know these things because we're told these from an early age. It doesn't hurt to refresh yourself from time to time. I'm actually reading some Jim Rohn right now and talking. The book is called Unshakable, and some of the stuff that's helped him build his career and make you more resilient. You said something that really resonated with me. It centers around responsibility. And I tell this to my children all the time. If I had to pick one single word in the entire English lexicon that would embody what I believe in and what would make people successful, I believe responsibility and accountability, the same word, so it's almost is my most important word, because it drives your core philosophies with everything henceforth, from truth telling, being purpose driven, stepping into the game, all of those things that you just rattled off. All of them for me center around the responsibility of showing up and making sure that I'm dedicating myself to a craft, putting in the necessary time and energy, being purpose driven and understanding what that looks like. But yeah, I love that you said that. And it doesn't hurt, like we're going down this direction on a rabbit hole here, but it doesn't hurt just because you've already read something. How many times have you gone back and read something a second and third and fourth time? And like, I don't even remember seeing that the first time I read that. So it's like these lines, if you can learn to read between the lines in a book, there's always a new experience that pops out at you, isn't it?
It's that classic metaphor of the river. You put your hand in the river, it's never the same river the second time, right?
Yeah.
Because you're changing, the river's changing, and life is like that. You can have a random conversation with a friend, and 10 years later, it pops up as something that meaningfully changes your life. But having that awareness, that opening for that to happen, I think is something that a lot of people forget. They think that this worked for me and I'm not changing.
Yeah.
That in today's fast changing world, that's a good way to lose. But we do have a set of values that tend not to change, but we are or we are not aware of them, and we do or we don't act on them. That's an issue for all of us as human beings.
That's a nice segue because we're going to talk about values next. But before I did, I want to make a little nod to what you just said. That river parable that you were talking, that's that's Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah.
And I literally read that every single morning. So well placed. What kind of a podcast where you get to go for entrepreneurialism, business, and marketing and get some Lao Tzu in it, man? This is it, the brand laboratory. You talked about values a second ago, and it's one of the things that I work with all my clients when we start out with the brand discovery, which is really setting their North Star. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And what are the coordinates that are going to get you there? And some of those coordinates are values. And you touched on something that's really compelling, and I really want you to share your piece around values. What do values do for an organization, for an entrepreneur? And how do they serve as guiding principles? What's your take on that?
People always go back to them. They don't change, number one, and they don't respond to training or coaching. They're there or they're not. That's one of the things you learn about values. In that, there's a grid, that one of those classic four square grids, where the vertical axis is results and the horizontal axis is values. And so if you're low on results and low on values, you throw a going away party for that staff member. They're never going to contribute. They're never going to be happy, and you're not going to be happy with them. If they're high on values and low on results, you can train and coach, because values are the most important. They're the lodestar, the North Star, whatever, however you want to, the foundation. If they're high on results and high on values, they are your superstars. You pay them more. You give them trips to Hawaii with their wife. You rotate them around to different jobs. You prepare them to take over for you. The tricky one is high on results and low on values.
Mm.
That's the person that'll get you in trouble.
Let me pause you there for a second, because I want to go back to that list at the beginning, because you said something that I don't know that I necessarily agree with you on, and I want to hear your take on it. So convince me otherwise. You said that values don't change, but in my experience, values do have some shifting going on, whether it be from life experiences, whether it be cultural and social influences, whether it be personal growth and education. And just to use me as the guinea pig here, I'm divorced like you. My first wife and I got divorced almost 12 years, 13 years ago. And I realized introspectively post divorce that the values that I had carried through my 10 years of marriage were shifting into a completely different trajectory for me. And the things that I once thought were really important to me weren't necessarily so important to me anymore. And for example, I came straight out of college and jumped into the corporate world. And I was monetarily driven. I was competitively driven. I'm a lifelong athlete. I didn't give a shit about anything else but my own personal growth. But as soon as I got divorced, I was put up on this microscope, if you will, a self-imposed microscope. And I was like, what the fuck did I do wrong? How could I have failed at something? I've never failed at anything. Lifelong success. Never, for all intents and purposes, I've always done something really well. And then this thing came up. I failed my two children who I had at the time. I failed myself. I failed my wife. And so I had to really just dig deep and ask myself, how did I get here? And what I realized is that my values that were important to me pre Devo, I call it pre Devo, were not the same values that I was now starting to love and started to imbue. So you said that they don't change. Can you clarify what your meaning is behind that, or give me some argument that will change my opinion?
The way that I say it, and that researchers would support, is that your behaviors change. And
Mm.
you know what works for you, what you think works for you, and what doesn't work for you. Values are at a much deeper level. Speaking of divorce and business failure, I was in the middle of those two things simultaneously. And I reached out to a former employee who had become a coach, and he became my coach. And for about 3 months, I spoke to him once a week. And for 3 months, all he did was on telephone, you could tell he was nodding and saying, I understand, I see. He didn't say anything for 3 months. And finally, one night, he said, I have a question for you. And because what I was doing is I was being a victim of my soon to be former wife, a victim of some betrayal in my own company. I was a victim. I'm a guy who wrote a book on accountability, and I'm being a victim. But of course, I'm being a subtle, sophisticated victim,
Yeah.
because I know how to be a victim. And he says, I'm going to ask you a question. I said, great. Wow. He said, wouldn't it be useful to take 100% responsibility for everything? And it changed my life. And of course, he used a key word, useful,
Mm.
which penetrated right into one of my values, which is things need to be useful, not theoretical, not just a concept. And I looked at, and part of that, what happened after that phone call, was that somehow what popped up was my relationship with my, at that time, departed mother, who had died a few years earlier, who I held as this angry, violent woman who had a lot of children but didn't like any of them, and really a negative picture of her. And suddenly I realized this woman had been widowed 3 times. And in my entire life experience with her, she never complained. She never stepped into the victim role.
Mm.
And what I realized is when I went to that early training and they talked about personal responsibility, they were triggering something in me that was already there.
Mm.
I already had a life example of somebody who was never a victim. who terrible things happened in her life, but she was never a victim. She never owned a home until I bought her one
Amazing.
uh, when she was in her 60s. And the list goes on and on. Health problems, husband problems, kid problems, never complained.
My grandfather, who really was more responsible for raising me than my father, used to always say to me, if you don't complain unless you have an alternative solution to it. Don't come to me with a gripe. Don't come to
Yeah.
me with anything that you haven't upset about unless you have an alternative solution. And I'm paraphrasing him because this went a little bit longer. He was long-winded like you and I. Victimhood is a prison. Yeah,
Yeah.
victimhood is a prison where you hold the key, something to this effect. And freedom begins when you choose to rewrite your story and stop blaming everyone else for
Yes.
your problems, something along those lines. And I always love that whole idea of victimhood being a prison because we get caught up, and I was like you, blaming everyone else for our problems. My divorce was my wife's fault. My first business failed. That was everyone else's fault. They just weren't in tune with my genius, like whatever it is. And it's no, dude, it takes two to tango. So you have to sometimes be able to step back and have another key word for me is self-awareness and being
Yes.
able to understand the room around you and see that sometimes, oftentimes, your problems and your trepidations are caused by your own doing. And I don't know. I firmly believe in that. What sets you apart as an executive mentor? You're working with highly profile individuals, very successful individuals, people who have great acumen and intellects and they're driven. Why do people need a coach and why a coach like yourself?
I think part of it is that I've been there and done that, frankly. It's not theory to me, it's not academic learning, it is experience. The experiences I've had founding and leading these companies, and to some success, to some failure, to some struggles. So I very seldom run into a client that's having a problem that I haven't had and either successfully or unsuccessfully addressed. That's one thing. The other thing is that doing the work that I do is to look at that term transformational, that you don't just get a little bit better, but you get dramatically better because you get a new perspective on life and living and business.
Mm.
And a word that comes up a lot in my work and with my clients is breakthrough. Things
Ah.
happen where lifelong patterns of behavior, and that's that key about that values question. Is it a value or is it a behavior? And
Mm.
you can change behaviors. And I've had a lot of feedback on some of my behaviors that didn't work for the people around me, and some behaviors that I have that really do work. And by the way, those are values based. But that's going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Uh, what I do that's different is I've been there and done that. I've had those life experiences, but also that I've been running a company with some immensely talented people about how to shift your perspective in life. My company that had the success in Asia and in the US, ARC, is an acronym. And you've used all three, you used two of the three words so far. ARC, awareness, responsibility, and communication. Our
Love that.
trainings are organized around that. My book is organized around that. I believe strongly that if you can tune up your awareness, really start developing what my former wife referred to as a higher state of noticing what's
Mm.
going on with yourself and with the people around you. Then secondly, own it. Take responsibility for it, all of it. The good news, the bad news, everything, and do that without blame, shame, or regret, or guilt. It's just what is. And then finally, what all entrepreneurs, and that's my primary working audience, are people like me, small, medium-sized business people, is mastery in communication, spoken, listening, body language, all of the ways we communicate. You better get very good at. If there's one training, outside training that I recommend to my clients, it's sales training.
Mm.
Because if you can't sell, it's pretty hard to build a business. That's like
If
some of these geniuses that invent a new software program or a new technology. That's most often what blocks them is that they cannot sell their idea.
I just finished watching the Olympics, which say what you will about the Olympics and the opening, closing ceremonies and all the nonsense that went around that. The athletes are really what matters to me, the amount of
Yeah.
dedication to their craft. I get goosebumps watching some of these athletes, and being an athlete myself, I know what goes into it. And I was watching the men's basketball final, and one of the commentators, I think it was, I forget his name, but Dwayne Wade was one of the commentators. And
Yes.
he made a comment to alluding to the fact that the US basketball team had a very diverse population of different types of talent. and that individuals on the team each sort of had a were the coach who put the team together was really good at finding role players and all stars, and like how he put that chemistry together was phenomenal. And it really made me think about, this is a question for you. It really made me think about, if you were building your all-star team of business builders or whatever it is in all of your years of experience, and you mentioned two words that are really important to me: experience and talent. Who else would be on that team? So you get five people and you get to choose from these. So if you have to write these down, you can, because this is what I've been sorting through in my head: experience, talent, collaboration, or like the ability to collaborate, like connectors, builders. Emotional intelligence is a really big one for me. Integrity is another big one for me, and resilience and responsibility. Who would you pick for your five?
I would look, first of all, for someone that is a better salesman than me. I'm a reasonably good one, but I'm looking for a genius around
Resilience
market.
too.
That's actually, you picked out I choose a word every year for me to work on, and resilience is my word this year.
I
So
love that. I love that.
I'm looking for somebody that has a values match. They're excited about the same things that I'm excited about, or very close, aligned, not agreed, but aligned with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for that. I'm looking for a talent like sales. I'm looking for one administrator, one person that pays attention to details and follow up and organization.
Mm.
I'm looking for one person that everybody loves. One of my dear friends and a former client recently accepted a job. Originally, she accepted a job with a company called Advanced Space. The Denver area is now like a sub headquarters for the space programs. We've got a lot of space oriented companies here. So she took a job running marketing and PR for that company. It's about a 50-person company. And then she got promoted to be the chief operating officer. So she called me. She's freaked out. She's never done anything like that. And she doesn't match the profile of a COO of this company. And what I helped her see, just as a friend, was they wanted her to do that because they've got all these incredible scientists working there who don't relate to each other or to anybody else. They live in their heads, they don't live in their hearts. She's exactly the opposite. And that CEO knew what he wanted. He wanted somebody that everybody liked, that everybody could talk with. They could share their problems, their opportunities, their whole lives, not just their scientific work. And she's doing a fabulous job. So that kind of thing guides me. I like having one person who is a glue person, a catalyst, a relationship, purely relationship oriented. In my business, one of my reputations, I've fired more trainers than anybody knows for a variety of reasons. I'm rigorous about results. So that's my strength.
All right,
But
I
what,
want to go back to the list though. You're not getting off the hook that easy. So we have sales,
yep,
we have administrative, project
yep.
management, administrative. We have charismatic or relationships. So that's three. We have someone who resilience, someone fortitude based. And what's your fifth?
Oh, wow. Somebody very good at whatever the technology or the product knowledge. Somebody that's so deep in it, they live in it. They think about it when they wake up in the morning.
Like an analytical engineer.
Like an engineer or an expert, people that study flavors, if it's a
Mm,
food oriented industry.
yeah.
Somebody that's so good at that I would listen to when crunch time came and I had to make a decision.
I like your team. That's an all-star squad. It's an interesting question to go through, and I'm actually going to put together an exercise on this for some of my clients to understand their mindset around stuff. I'd never really thought about it that way, but as I heard him talking about it, I'm like, I'm in the business of building things and building teams and organizations. What do you look for? What are some tangible aspects and non and intangible aspects that you look for when you're trying to build a team? So I just thought I would ask you. In your prior conversation, we were talking about sort of your philosophies and whatnot, and I asked why you and why would someone hire a coach. If you had in a few words to summarize you what problem you solve in the world, what would you say? What is your unique value proposition in everything that you do? What do you bring to the table that is uniquely qualifiably Robert White, and the problems that you solve for the people that you connect and integrate with?
First thing that comes up for me, Devo, is the methodology. which in my case is 40 years of research testing and proving that experiential learning works. You can actually shift people's perspective by an experience as opposed to academic learning. But the piece that we are aiming toward, and I want to quote somebody else. Are you familiar with the book Traction?
I've heard it, but not read it.
Yeah. So that's that company is called EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System. And what they're very good at is the management of, let's say, medium-sized and larger companies. I'm not as good on management. I'm really good on leadership. But one of the things they teach and that I believe very strongly in is they have a little simple formula called GWC. And it's for evaluating your people or evaluating a new hire, but mostly for the people you already have. They rate people on GWC. Number one, do the people get it? And that's right in my wheelhouse. Do they get your purpose, your vision, your values, your strategic intent? Do they like it? Does it become part of their cellular structure? Secondly, do they want it? Do they want the job they're in, or they see it as just a stepping stone to some other job or some other company, even? Do they want the job they have? And finally, the C is capable. Are they capable? Do they know how to do their job? Or with a little bit of training, can they be trained up to be excellent at doing that? And so if I look at what I add that is different and powerful is an experience where teams come together by doing our work. They come together around the purpose of the organization, why it exists. That secondly, they are aligned to the vision. They want to contribute towards something that maybe they will never accomplish, but it is inspirational to them. And then are they values based? And are those values, again, aligned enough, consistent enough, positive enough to make things work? Having that salesman that produces great results but makes promises that cannot be kept, that's death to an organization ultimately. Even though the sale came in, it destroys everything else. That as an example. And so purpose, vision, values, and then what's your strategy and what's your goal for the next 90 days? It's not just your strategy, it's your intention. What is this entire organization living or dying for in the next 90 days?
So your unique value proposition is taking those elements that you just described, which is purpose and alignment and vision and values, and helping coalesce them for an organization or an individual, and in your own unique way that you do. That's what you would say.
Yes, and that it's result oriented.
Oh, I like
It's all
that.
about it's all about results. That's how you measure. That's how you change. That's how you tell the truth. The essence of all of our trainings is the same. I keep telling people, if you want to compete with me, I'll tell you how. It's not easy, but it's simple.
Mm.
We do three things in our trainings. We clear the past blame, shame, regret, guilt, or even past success can stop you going forward.
Mm.
So clear your past. Secondly, that you learn to better tell the truth about current reality. We entrepreneurs live in a story. I do, you do, everybody does. We've got a story. And that story is what gives us energy, attracts people to us. It's a great thing. Sometimes we can get lost in the story, and there's aspects of it that just aren't true.
Yeah.
And then finally, if you've done those two things, if you've done some work on completing your past, if you are better at telling the truth, what the Buddhists call it is developing a selfless regard for reality, getting past your ego, getting past your story. If you've done those two things, you can choose your future. It's not just taking your past and throwing it into your future.
Mm.
You're actually choosing a future from a neutral place and a more informed, more aware, and more responsible place. So that's all of our trainings are organized around those three things. And most training programs are not. And so that's our core competence. That's our advantage.
I love that. I love that you drop Buddha and Lao Tzu in the same conversation. So kudos. Where can people find you? What's the best way that you want people to connect with you?
Extraordinarypeople.com is the website, extraordinarypeople.com. And I make this offer that if they sign up for my weekly e-zine, it's called An Extraordinary Minute. It's now in its 15th year. Several thousand people read it every week. And it's a thought from someone else, and then my reaction to that thought, all designed to be read in 1 minute or less.
I love that.
So, So that's a way to be in relationship with me. If you hit reply, it goes to me, no one else.
I'm going to
And
subscribe to that today.
good. Welcome.
I like your 1 minute take on that. I'm actually reading this book called Smart
Oh,
Brevity right now. Have you read
hmm.
this?
I haven't. What a
Oh,
great title.
phenomenal book. It's how to connect with your audience in short pieces of information because in today's oversaturated information-based world, we have too much hitting us. And so people are just scrolling and thumbing on to the next. And so this book is really phenomenal and breaks down how to communicate more effectively, more impactfully in short, small bursts of information rather than long, drawn out. That I need this more than anyone else because I like to draw things out and talk. And so when I was working with my PR agent, she's okay. The first thing we're going to work on is you need to cut down your copy. There's way too much words in there. I'm like, I have so much to say. Don't the people want to hear it? And she's no,
Uh,
they don't actually. They just want small pieces of it, Devo. Slow yourself down a little bit. Anyway, Robert, we have run out of time. I really appreciate it. There's been a lot of things that you've dropped today. I love your values. I love your team. That was a really cool team. I took notes of that, and so I'm going to bring that into the next conversation I have. But is there anything else, any closing thoughts, anything that you're troubling with in your business, or anything that you'd like to share with your audience just before we walk away from this?
I want to encourage people to wake up, to read that book that somebody suggested. I just wrote down the Brevity book. I'll buy it today. But wake up, start noticing what the feedback that you're getting and that maybe you're being dismissive of. Ultimately, any kind of victim visit is self-defeating. And then finally, get to a level of mastery and communication. You don't have a choice in today's environment. You've got to be out there and visible and able to communicate your message to people, to your family, to your community, to your charities. But most of all, in this magical tool that we have called capitalism, to building a business that is profitable, that is making a difference in the world, and that is lasting.
Mm.
And it's all out there for you.
Mm. And I personally believe that you have an obligation, a personal obligation, that if you have a value that could be shared to other people to make their life, their business, anything better, I believe that everybody has a personal obligation to share that with the world. And never before in the history of my known humanity have we had more ample opportunities to share that message, whether it's social media, whether it's a blog, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's an email like Robert has, whether it's doing all of the above. If you have something that you think is worth sharing with other people that's going to make our life better, then you have an obligation to share that. And I really appreciate if you would take the time to do that. So, Robert, that was a very thoughtful conversation. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the Branding Laboratory. If you do, those of you who are listening, if you do want to connect with Robert, you'll find his information in the links below. He's at extraordinarypeople.com if you want to go straight to his website right now. We've covered some really cool points today for any entrepreneur, for any executive, for anybody who's in the business landscape that's looking to either scale or build something new. And if there's anybody who can help you do that, please get in touch with Robert or at least subscribe to his newsletter. Don't forget to subscribe to my show, The Branding Laboratory. Leave us a review. Tell us what you think. Robert was a great guest. Hopefully you think he and I had a good conversation because I thought it was phenomenal. Connect with us on social media. And don't forget, if you are looking to elevate your brand, please head over to my website, shameless plug, thebrandstoryteller.com, where I will teach you how to tell your story to a very specific audience and then use the tools in your marketing ammunition to amplify that story. I'd also like you to invite, I have something, can I share something I have coming down the line? I am starting what I'm calling the troubleshooting lab, where I'm going to be inviting other CEOs, other business leaders to hang out and connect with each other, try to solve some problems, try to network, etc., in a virtual environment. That's starting up the next month. So if you're interested, I also have a newsletter. There'll be more information on that as well as on social media. But until next time, I'm Deevo with the Brand Storyteller. This is Robert White. We're grateful you joined us today on the Branding Laboratory. Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Laboratory. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media for more branding tips and insights. And remember, your story matters. Until next time, keep building and sharing your unique brand story. I'll see you soon.